Welcome back to the Lift Free and Diet Hard podcast. I'm your host, Andrew Coates. Join me along with industry leaders and friends on a quest to get more people through the gym door and eating and living healthier. Join me where evidence meets empathy while rejecting fitness industry fads and extremism. Let's begin. My friend, Dr. Christle Guevarra. It is a big smile for the people listening on Spotify. Big smile. I love it. Last time I saw you, well, shit, you would have been speaking at my conference this past year 2 for you.
Gosh.
Wow. And
Wow.
you are, for the uninitiated, you are team physician, USA Figure Skating. You're a big part of the Renaissance Periodization team. We may talk about the new RPU towards the end. And you are gaining a ton of traction, in particular because your expertise in Ozempic GLP-1 agonist medications, which people are literally losing their minds over the industry. So let's actually dive into that.
All right. Yeah. Thank you so much for having me, Andrew. Really excited to be here again, just chatting with you about stuff.
And before I forget too, I'll be hanging out with you because I'll be attending and you will be speaking at Aram's Real Coaches Summit, April in Vegas. So guys, if you're interested, you can check that out too, right? But okay, Ozempic, GLP-1 agonist medications. People
Yes.
talk about fears over bone loss. Is this valid? What's really going on?
The GLP-1 agonist medications make it very, very easy to achieve a calorie deficit. Once you take out that food noise, man, people's hunger signals are now gone, and that's pretty much for a large majority of the population, a huge barrier to actually losing and sustaining weight loss. So once you remove that, people are seemingly, some people are able to, eat very little, unfortunately. And then you pair that with whether there's various reasons that we can get into. For lack of a better term, they're not resistance training. You get, the perfect storm for, not only like bone loss, but also muscle loss. You get that classic Ozempic butt, as they say on the internet, where things are looking a little saggy, that's not about firm or shapely. I really wish somebody would have told me that, how important resistance training was in the 90s when I was growing up, because I was, the magazines that I was reading back in the day really emphasized barely lifting any weights and like doing very high repetitions, maybe doing body weight exercises for tone. But never exceeding, heavy weight because that, is super dangerous.
All right, so we're seeing muscle loss. Is there anything about Ozempic over and above calories equated, protein equated, when someone would otherwise have traditionally dieted minus the Ozempic? Is there anything about Ozempic that is a further contributing to muscle loss or bone loss? And is there any other valid, legitimate concern over the use of Ozempic?
The As far as bone and muscle loss, no, I have not seen that. There are always side effects to medications, and I think it's important to always talk to your provider about the risk to benefit ratio and what, things that, might be concerning to you. I mean, I anecdotally, I have a colleague who had prescribed Ozempic to one of her patients, and one of her patients actually experienced a pretty adverse side effect, had to go to the hospital, and still said it was worth it, in my opinion. And so, one person's risk, risk profile is different from another. So I think it's always important to have that, conversation of, what am I, risking by taking this medication, and is this, or do the benefits outweigh it?
Are the incidences of side effects comparatively low, though, for people experiencing or using Ozempic?
Correct. And there are other ways that you can sort of kind of reduce your risk for potential side effects. So for the most common causes of side effects are nausea and vomiting. There is a dosing schedule in which you start off at a very low dose. Some people may not tolerate that very low dose. It's a few, but I have seen it, and there are other options to explore if that's the case. But also making sure that you're eating a well-balanced diet, not eating super junky food like pizza, cookies, French fries, fast food, because that can also really lead to people getting sick off of it. I've noticed that people, feeling not so great off of high fatty foods. And so, making sure to get your fiber. Another complaint that people seem to have is constipation. I have a hard time, when you start to tease it out with people, do you mean by constipation? You get into what it is they ate today, and it's almost akin to, a bodybuilding prep diet in the sense of like very little, like a handful of blueberries and, a couple of nuts, does not constitute a meal. I meant bodybuilder in the sense
Yeah.
of like very low calorie, not in terms of,
Chicken and rice and broccoli. So so how do you navigate this for the person who may be thinking about using it and who has been directed by their hunger signals, which are
Mhm,
disordered? You have, in our past episodes have talked about your own experience with it.
mhm.
So you got someone who's largely been eating in response to disordered hunger signaling, which is sort of constant food noise. And
Yeah,
then all of a sudden, you've taken away that food noise. So now they don't have the primary reminder to actually eat. So,
right.
and you alluded to, there are people who all of a sudden are not thinking about food at all. So maybe they're not eating. How do you get that person to find the middle ground where they're eating enough of the nutritious stuff?
No, great question. It's always going to be an ongoing conversation, which is why I also think it's super important that as a physician, to have a really great team with you, because let's face it, physicians can't, they cannot be coach and, physician at the same time, especially in a traditional practice. So, one, the medication is this effects are actually dose dependent. So, do we really need to go up to the maximum dose like all of a sudden, like as soon as possible? If the weight, and I feel like this is where, at least from the medicine side point of view, where we kind of get, we kind of miss the forest from the trees, is really paying attention to the rate of weight loss and then also the total amount of weight lost within a particular period. I find that people just sort of get put on these drugs and they continuously crank up the dose and then expect them to continuously be in a caloric deficit and lose weight for very long periods of time. What I have seen with a lot of some people is, they'll be steadily losing weight for a year and a half, and then they'll hit that plateau, which is fine. But then they'll find themselves frustrated. A lot of times they'll find themselves exhausted. Um, they'll feel like, desire to exercise is very little, desire to move is very little, super hungry, super ravenous. Find that they're now, even on the same dose, are very much struggling, to stay within their calories or their original calorie deficit. The scale starts to creep up a little bit, and then they find themselves like, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do, panic. So I think taking a bit of a more long-term play, and kind of periodizing the fat loss phases, and baking it in with periods of maintenance where you actually purposely raise the calories, let them recover from, physically and psychologically from dieting, seems to be a much longer term approach that seems to be a little bit more sustainable, at least in the patients that I've worked with.
You alluded to the rate of fat loss, and it reminds me. So back in would have been 2018, there was a local conference, and Dr. Spencer Nadolsky, who has been your physician through this, he mentioned this in his presentation, and so did Martin McDonald. Martin was here,
Oh,
and they both talked about there was some data at the time, and I
hmm.
don't know beyond this, that we have traditionally said we've believed
Yeah.
that slower rate of fat loss is better, more sustainable. But they actually had data that said that people who lost weight faster saw better results
Hmm.
and kept it off. Now,
Hmm.
I haven't heard much talk about this since. Maybe it was sort of a weird blip, but
Yeah.
when it comes to Ozempic, are you guys actually seeing anything where the people who are losing weight faster are actually having better outcomes? Is it definitely, at least anecdotally, seem like, hey, gradual weight gain has been preferable? Is faster weight loss a risk factor for additional muscle and bone loss? Any thoughts there?
You know, I haven't I haven't seen the patients that are in my practice. I haven't quite seen, the whole faster approach. And honestly, I'm not sure if that might work with people whose BMIs are much higher, because I know at a certain point, it does become, like we really need to get the weight off very quickly. I get that.
Mm.
I don't work with, I haven't personally worked with sort of that population. So I find that, at least for myself, trying to take that slower approach has been a little bit better. The people that I've seen um, kind of try and really go at it, really burn through and lose, kind of higher rates, a higher weight loss. I haven't seen too many, anecdotally, seen too many success stories. Um, so, and then also the other thing too is like trying to emphasize the habits, and the process versus the outcome goals. And I know that that's, a really hard thing to sell because it's boring. It's, not very sexy. Everybody wants the after picture, but so I tend to really gravitate towards people who are really, at least committed to trying out, the process versus like, hey, I'm going to get you shredded in 30 days. Like, let's, see much fat we can lose, in a short amount of time.
You mentioned food noise a couple times, and this is a
Yeah.
constant, like it's the thing people talk about. And you personally experienced this. What's going on here? Both, yeah, I've had people give me feedback, not wanting to have like too much jargon or what have you, but say like, what's going on a mechanistic level for the everyday user, and maybe on an experiential level, because you've had that experience.
Yeah, the studies, there are receptors in parts of our brain that there are GLP-1 receptors in our brains, various parts of our brains, that signal, when I'm feeling full and also signal when I'm feeling hungry. And so this medication not just works on our guts, doesn't always, not only do we have it, in our pancreas, we also have receptors in our hearts, but we also have receptors in our brains too. So I guess I feel like that's kind of the easiest way to kind of explain that, because it's different. And it is a much different, you're right, it is a much different feeling than, taking caffeine, stimulant, in order to stave off hunger, because the hunger's still there. um, it's a really trippy sensation to be on this medication and just feel like, oh, this is what thin people must feel like, being able to sit down at a restaurant and even have a lot of really good food in front of you and not feel like you have to inhale everything, clean your plate, clean your friend's plate, and, maybe, feel a little bit embarrassed because you're still hungry. Feel like this never ending, your stomach is this never ending pit of despair. To, if I had to kind of explain what my experience is like at, a sushi buffet with friends, so to speak.
It makes me think of, I was literally at a breakfast buffet this weekend. My friend brought me on a retreat and had me speak at
Hmm.
something, and Lee Boyce was there speaking. And we had this amazing breakfast buffet and these wonderful waffles and everything. I'm like, love the food. But I distinctly remember eating a certain point and I'm feeling full.
Right,
So I take that for granted that that's my normal experience.
right.
Okay, so what's happening on a hormonal brain gut relationship level where this hunger signaling has become dysregulated? Or is this to do with the hormones like leptin and ghrelin, or is it some?
So that's a really great question. These medications don't necessarily work on the leptin or ghrelin level. And but there are other medications that are coming down the pipeline that are trying to um, affect those, kind of mimic those effects. So, there's also another pathway. I believe I can't remember if I spoke about retatrutide at your conference, the triple threat, right? That not only affects food noise, but then also, has this third pathway that actually can raise your body temperature and your metabolism in and of itself. So you have the food noise is gone, and now I'm suddenly burning a little bit more calories. So,
Sounds
but
like
yeah,
plan B.
without the stimulant sort of effect. So
Okay.
we'll see where that goes. So not necessarily the yeah, it doesn't necessarily affect that pathway, not to my knowledge, at least.
Because I think this is getting a
Yeah,
bit technical, but I
yeah.
think the industry for years, I think it's references Stefan Guyenet's book, The Hungry Brain, which I think is a
Oh,
really good book
yes.
to for people if they want to understand some of the physiological and psychological things that work against you in the effort to lose weight. But there's a lot of talk of leptin, and maybe it's in there, I swear, that the pharmaceutical companies were like really looking at leptin as,
Hmm.
okay, maybe this is going to be the thing. And it never, at least at this stage, ever panned out as an effective weight loss thing, supplementing with exogenous leptin, which is the hunger suppression one.
Right.
Ghrelin, I like this one. If people are like, here, like, what the fuck are these words? Ghrelin, think gremlin, hungry little gremlin. It's a really good
Yes.
way to remember that, right? So, but these are very important appetite hormones, but GLP-1 agonists work on a separate thing. From your own experience, then, say, how did you change your relationship with food to where you're not feeling the noise? So therefore, how did you turn around and go, okay, now I have to eat for nutrition, performance, sustenance?
Oh gosh, that takes me back actually quite a ways away. With the first time I really dieted for to be like lean, I was lifting weights. I thought I was doing everything right. I had hired this kind of infamous bodybuilding prep coach who like put me on like this was back in 2011 or so, put me on dried chicken breast, broccoli, maybe some oatmeal, and then a day or two I'd have nothing but chicken breast and broccoli, like no carbs, starving myself. And it wasn't I had and I failed at that diet. Basically, I had dieted myself for a year like that. I had gone through periods of binging, um, you know, and the hunger signaling was so terrible that I actually couldn't sleep for a couple of months, like towards the end of my rope, working with this coach. I remember tossing and turning at night because I felt like my stomach was eating itself. And then I would just be a zombie all day. I had just started medical school. I was in the advanced summer anatomy class, the accelerated one where, we were like, oh, we're going to start med school early. I failed. I actually failed my anatomy in medical school, had to retake it. And then I stopped the diet because that was like the wake up call that I was like, for a long time, I thought like, well, this is just what I got to do to get lean. I just need more willpower. And here I am now, not lean. I was a soft 130 because looking back, I could barely grind through my lifts. They were all terrible looking back. I on the scale weight said 130 pounds, but it just looked, nothing like a stage competitor. And now I've, basically essentially wasted 3 months of my life in med school. I'm in debt. And if I don't pass this class, like I might fail out of, med school. So here I am in the gutter. It actually wasn't until I had actually reached out to Jen Kamas from Girls Gone Strong,
Mm-hmm.
and I told her my situation. I was an emotional mess, and she actually, I haven't reached out to thank her. I probably should give her send her an email and, just kind of thanking her for, basically she said to me, hey, I think you should actually like actually can't help you because because my goal was to I just want to lose the weight again. My weight was climbing up, but she was like, I think we can get you to a place where you can actually enjoy some food, kind of maintain, stabilize your weight. I can't recommend fat loss right now. I
Mm-hmm.
just actually can't. And if that's what you want, no worries, you can find somebody else, but this is what I can offer you, kind of take it or leave it. And at the time I was just a wreck. But I was like, okay, I'll give it a shot. And she, put me on, she just kind of put me on this like stable, a healthy vegetable, a lean source of protein, complex carbohydrate, some healthy fat, something consistent. Um, and I think it worked out very well because it was a schedule. It was at least something for me to, in that kind of chaotic world, I had this, what I needed was some structure, and some balance, but what I didn't need was this whole, I need to lose the weight again. So that's when I started to at least realize that, hey, I did a couple things wrong here, and that's okay. But now is not the time for being lean, but I also can't go in the opposite direction and just like eat whatever and not resistance train. Training was always something that I love to do no matter what, so I never really had an issue with that, so to speak. But yeah, it was after that really disastrous incident in med school that really just kind of, I got to start really thinking about fueling myself and not necessarily always thinking about like I got to cut the calories, I got to be lean, I got to be lean.
I think that's amazing for anybody, regardless of messing around with this medication or not. I'm also laughing because I'm thinking, I wonder if this bodybuilding coach that wasn't that great for you lives in fear of Dr. Mike turning around and just like doing a YouTube episode. For the uninitiated, Christle also happens to be married to Dr. Mike Isertel, who's rather well known in the industry, and just waiting for that episode where Mike scours the internet for every stupid thing this coach has ever done. No, we're not that petty, right?
No, and I've made peace with it. I mean, I also was like, everything's fine. Like, because in my world, I thought everything was fine. Like, this guy, this person's gonna tell me what to do, and of course I'm gonna do it. So, and it wasn't, and I think after that, I really started to take a harder look at like, is this right for me? What worked and what didn't work? And so even though, might have not have been the best approach, it at least kind of opened my eyes to being a lot more thoughtful, and a lot more introspective as far as like what works, what doesn't work, taking a real good look of like, okay, like here's where I could, improve for the next time. So I feel like every year, every training block has always been like, what are the lessons I'm taking from this? And how can I get better? It didn't just magically come in one day that like I all of a sudden like had this physique and like I'm posting, these photo shoot pictures. Like it was a decade long process of like trial and error, continuously doing some things right, maybe making some mistakes here and there, but like never giving up on, yourself. If that makes sense.
Tons of positive messages there. We also see the industry. There's a corner that is just determined to criticize Ozempic, right? And there's
Yeah.
two sides of that. And I'll go to the second side after, and that's kind of the morality side. But
Yeah.
there are also people who look at things like, and you already mentioned something to
Yeah.
the effect of, how you need greater and greater doses. So does Ozempic's effectiveness wear off over time? Do people become sensitized to it? Do people need to stay on it forever
Hmm.
to keep the food noise away?
Hmm.
And what about concerns over affordability?
Yeah. The I don't see people who I don't see people's tolerances like increasing over time. What I do see is people continuing in a calorie deficit while on these medications for long periods of time, and I can't, discern whether or like, so it's hard for me to say whether or not it's because of the prolonged calorie deficit, and I'm inclined to go with the prolonged calorie deficit, is what's really getting in people's way. Um, as far as if people should be on this medication for life, the food noise is a real big thing. So, and obesity is a chronic condition. So I'd be inclined to say yes. It's okay for people to be on this for life. That being said, there are people who have come off the medication and have done well. and have still, sort of maintained most of their weight loss. Um, but a lot of times I like to go with, the food noise is going to come back. And so we need to figure out a way to navigate around that. So you're not white knuckling, your life trying to be a certain size. Um, the other thing too is that for some of these people who start on these medications, um, their habits, their eating habits, their cooking habits might be in one place. And who knows, by the, months down the line, years down the line, they are now cooking their own food. They're, having a well-balanced plate. They're eating lots of fruits and vegetables. In those instances, it would be, interesting to see if there's a correlation between like people's lifestyle habits and whether or not they come off the medication. I know for myself, I eat 4 meals a day with, 30 grams of protein, 10 grams of fat, somewhere between 30 and 50 grams of carbs. And I cook it at home. They're all very, lower palatable foods. And I still have food noise. So I'm still on this medication. And that's okay.
It sounds like the same things that people who lose the weight, keep it off because they stay active, they resistance train, they
Yeah.
genuinely change their environment, the type of meals they cook. They're the smaller percentage of the cohort because it's so massively overweighted by
Right.
people who yo-yo diet,
Right.
which is why I hate that statistic because it gets weaponized by some, I think. I've been on a couple podcasts today. I've mentioned in both of them. I think there's these bad faith actors, these ideologues who would like to
Yeah.
whip that around to tell you it's not even worth even trying. You shouldn't try to lose the weight in the first place. And
Yeah.
that that to me is a bad message because I think it's disempowering and it resigns
Yeah.
people to their fate. Not going to get on that particular diatribe. Uh, okay, concerns over cost.
Oh, I'm very much concerned over cost, especially insurance. Don't even get me started down that rabbit hole. It's a battle out there. I see that, especially since this is the new year, insurance companies have changed. Some insurance companies are changing their stance, so such that, oh, we're not covering Wegovy anymore for just weight loss. You either have to have, one patient said that her insurance told her that she needed to have it for like, you need to have cardiovascular disease, you need to have, so, some type of like qualifying diagnosis in order to get this. And so I was like, oh, basically you have to have a heart attack or something, or, they want you to get sick. So I'm really just, yeah, just had that conversation today. The compounding pharmacies, have done an okay or job of trying to drive that cost down here in the United States. I know a lot of physicians are, have some type of, emotion or, opinion about compounding pharmacies versus FDA approved, like, medication from either Eli Lilly or, what have you. But, you're stuck between a rock and a hard place. Compounding pharmacies do come with risks. But I think in the hierarchy of risk, I think it is a much safer option than maybe going through with like a research peptide website, which also has its pros and cons.
Mm.
Um, but I have seen people in the height of the drug shortage end up, kind of looking towards the gray market for it. And I can't blame them. As much as I'd be like, you need to buy this, when somebody has, it's $1,000 for a 4 week supply, like, what am I supposed to tell them?
How long are these medications protected under patent before they can become generic?
Oh gosh, I think the last time I looked it up, we were looking somewhere along the late 2020s, early 2030s, until that happens. So,
It's not going to save people now, but it theoretically could be sooner rather than later. Okay. It's not like the intellectual property rights of, I think some of them, this is totally a side quest, Marvel and some DC comic intellectual properties are actually about to come off. I think like Batman and Superman might be vulnerable to this.
Oh,
That's the thing, right? Because they've been around
oh,
for so long, and
yeah,
there's only so long that these companies can actually hold intellectual property rights.
yeah.
So, for example, Dracula has long been public domain. Robin Hood has long been publicly domain.
Oh,
So you could actually create your iteration of Robin Hood or Dracula or the Mummy or you name it, like all this stuff.
yeah.
Whereas Batman and Superman, they're coming up really soon, within a few years. So there's a
Oh,
fight with these things. But people have this misunderstanding, and this hopefully is just interesting. It doesn't mean that everything that's happened since with Batman and all of the villains and everything is suddenly public domain. It's only that particular iteration. So Superman, his powers have evolved over time, and I don't know if the first Superman could fly or if he had X-ray
right.
vision. So only the version of him. I think the one there's a Winnie the Pooh horror movie, and Winnie the Pooh came off of intellectual property trademark rights, and someone immediately made this like slash. Apparently, it was quite popular. This slasher film with Winnie the Pooh, but it did not have all the other characters because all the other characters weren't available. Anyway, I hope people just found that kind of interesting and didn't piss them
Yeah.
off. Okay, so with the concerns over cost, what about when we see people marketing nature's Ozempic type products? Oh, I roll. Okay, what's going on there?
Um, the I remember getting an Instagram ad for one like Nature's Ozempic. These are not if you're trying to like brew some special tea thinking that this is gonna magically boost your Ozempic. So the problem is with the native the GLP-1 hormone that we secrete in our from our small intestine, that has a half-life of somewhere between 3 and 5 minutes. You have an enzyme called DPP4 for short that goes in and deactivates it. So, and then the deactivated now GLP-1 is now bunk, your hormone is now bunk, and then it gets peed out, and then the life cycle begins again. So if you're trying to boost your natural, it's just going to get shut down by an enzyme that you already have in your body. So the reason why these medications work is that these the GLP-1 agonist it's structurally able to evade DPP4. So it's able to, hey, enzyme, like you can't do shit to me. I'm going to head on over to this receptor and make the magic happen. I'm going to tell the pancreas to go secrete some insulin, and you can't touch me because, my structure is completely different. So I think when people think about the GLP-1 agonist, it's a completely separate structure than that of your native original GLP-1 hormone that you make in your body.
So is it safe to say that these things are effectively scams?
Yes, the one, especially the ones that I have seen where it's like you look at the ingredients list and you're like lemon, the fuck, like, sorry, you're like
Please fire
herbs,
away.
some herb or whatever. Look at, like, take a look and see what the ingredients list is. Honestly, I would probably just take a picture of it, upload the ingredients list to Chat GPT and be like, hey, can you help sort this out? Like, what do you think about it? I love helping. You can do your own research. I find that AI, most of the AI tools have already seen everything on the internet and more, and it is constantly be evolving and learning. So, I've used that to kind of help myself out. So for those of you who are like, I don't know what to do, like I don't want to do my own research, like sometimes it's hard. I've got 15 coaching clients in one day. It would be could be to your benefit to have a little bit, a little sidekick AI in your pocket to kind of help you out with these types of things. But the ingredients list that I've seen for a lot of these kind of supplements that kind of help boost your natural Ozempic have been like, yeah, eye rolling at best. Scam.
It's funny you mentioned AI. Like Mike, your husband, has been like nonstop talking about AI on like Twitter at least, and I've seen it pop up elsewhere. So is that like you guys are just like consciously like interested in this thing? I mean, this is a total side quest, but
No, so a little bit I guess I'm not as like this is amazing in the sense of he gets really emotional about it in like the best way possible. I love it. Um, I do really find that AI has been helpful not just for myself at work, um, but just even trying to navigate, pretty much everything. It really gives you, for just everyday things, like how can I write this email to somebody, in a polite way and not come off as abrasive because I know that that was my sort of issue. That has been an issue for me. Like, how do I, how do I create content? Like, here's what I want to say. Can you help me make like find the words to kind of, this is what my general idea is, and it'll give me an idea, and then I will rewrite that idea into my own words. And I find it to be super helpful in that sense. Or like, hey, this is a situation that I had with a friend. Like, what do you think about it? Like, how can I do better? Am I wrong? Or, it has like and then also the other things too is I can take a picture of my meal and upload it. And hey, can you estimate these macros for me? Because I know for a lot of people, like going to restaurants has been a little bit of a difficult challenge. And so there's been a huge benefit. I don't think Chat GPT 3.5 exists anymore, but there's a huge upgrade from 3.5 to 4.0. The accuracy in which they were able to estimate stuff has been really, really neat because I know Mike is really good about estimating calories. So I would take a picture on ChatGPT and then I'd be like, "Hey Mike, what do you think? What do you think these macros are, are on this burrito bowl?" And then I would compare and they were they were pretty spot on. So and then also I would actually weigh out my own food and then try and pretend, like this is, try and get it to guesstimate. And it was pretty spot on.
I
So
mean, Mike's kind of like a supercomputer algorithm on his own. So does that kind of
yep.
say more about how amazing ChatGPT is, or does that say how amazing Mike is? Or
A little bit of both.
he's one of my favorites too. So okay, this is going in an interesting direction. I wasn't planning on thinking about AI. Are there any other ways that you think the everyday person who, like, I mean, I was kind of, oh my God, I never thought about that. The person who is plugged into this conversation might be thinking about using Ozempic, the coach who's thinking about it, and that's where we started. But nutrition, fat loss, anything. Are there any other applications that you think people aren't even realizing where AI may actually be really helpful on this quest?
Oh, like as a client or a coach or just anybody in
Yeah,
general.
yeah.
Oh, oh gosh. Yeah. Like even, I can't remember if I had chatted about this, during, the Edmonton, seminar, but like, you see these headlines of, like Ozempic butt, or, pancreatitis or stomach paralysis. I'd literally just go to ChatGPT and ask, hey, like, I read this thing called stomach paralysis on the internet involving Ozempic. Can you tell me more about it? And it'll just sit there and kind of calmly kind of walk you through like what does this actually mean? Like stomach paralysis is technically the medical term is gastroparesis. What are the risk factors for gastroparesis? You know, and for a lot of these things, the kind of big kind of the common factor in there is the fact that a lot of like things like gastroparesis, things like blindness, diabetes is also linked to gastroparesis and blindness because it affects the nerve, the blood vessels that go to all of your organs. It affects the nerves that go to all of your organs, and diabetes does.
Hmm.
So, this is a medication that was originally also, FDA approved for type 2 diabetes. And so we have to keep in mind that, it is not there is an correlation does not necessarily imply
Hmm.
causation with a lot of these studies. So I think we need to keep that in mind. But um, yeah, using it for everyday things to help you define stuff, being able to walk through a problem like Ozempic butt and kind of helping you navigate like what does the literature say? It's, AI has just been a really helpful tool, and the more you use it, the more I'm, integrating it into my daily work flow routine. I just find it to be a huge help. I like honestly, um, coming up with ideas or like I'm stuck on a word and I don't know exactly how to, verbalize it. It's just faster. It's just, yeah. It's been a huge help.
I dabble in it a little bit. Mostly, I always say please and thank you to it, just in case,
Yeah.
Skynet happens and
Yes.
it decides you were nice to me, right? And I
Yeah.
both joke about that, but I'm dead serious. I always am really polite when it comes to like any interaction like that. Okay,
Same here.
another thing that I
Hmm.
think's actually worth asking you about, I figure you
Yeah.
probably would know, is we hear talk of implications of Ozempic, GLP-1 agonist medications on other potentially
Mm.
addictive or problem
Yes.
behaviors in our lifestyle. And at least I'm hearing anecdotally, it sounds like
Yeah.
there's something here that people are noticing
Yeah.
in, like less problems with me. I think gambling might be one of the things, drug addiction, that sort of stuff. What's happening on that front?
There's still the studies are still very early on its role in addiction. They are hoping that it'll be easier to do studies on these now that there is a known, clinical benefit for people with, since it is an FDA approved drug for type 2 diabetes, for weight loss, that trying to get approval to do more clinical research on addictive, you know, um, issues is going to be a much easier process to, as far as the IRB approval is concerned. I have seen it for alcohol use. I've seen positive benefits in those. I can't remember if it was cocaine, meth, or both. Also great. Tobacco, cigarette smoke. I was actually kind of starting to try and grab the article before I hopped on this podcast. I got stuck at a paywall.
Hmm.
They were looking at potential benefits in people with schizophrenia. And at least one anecdotal uh, kind of anecdote from a physician who had mentioned that they had seen this in their family member who had schizophrenia, start on a GLP-1, and it was like the person can now function like, kind of mentally kind of was now sort of, able to, cook meals, able to, keep a schedule, like things that, somebody with, depending on their degree of schizophrenia is just not able to do. So it was like kind of like a switch. So it is unclear what is actually going, but things look very positive.
I swear I've heard things, and you know better than me,
Yeah.
about improvements in certain psychiatric disorders when people were given, I think, low carb diets, but I
Hmm.
would suspect it probably has to do with the reduction of poor quality food and lowering of overall calories. Is that true? And could there be a relationship there?
Um, yeah, I've seen I think the low carb thing, I have seen some of the literature, particularly with people with seizure disorders.
Hmm.
It's been a while since I have taken a look at that literature. And I honestly couldn't tell you if it's just the calorie part um or the food quality part or both. But for, for psychiatric disorders, you with a lot of drugs that do treat psychiatric disorders, a big side effect is metabolic syndrome, lots of weight gain, rapid weight
Hmm.
gain.
Hmm.
Um, and I have tried to tease out whether that is like I'm starving all the time, I'm just consuming a lot of calories versus versus like there's something inherent about the medication that is causing the weight gain. I haven't really, gotten a clear answer, and I actually don't see too many
Hmm.
patients who are on that medication currently in my practice, so hard to
We're
say.
wandering a little far afield, but I think
Yeah.
I certainly get the impression that it's a promising field of
Gosh.
exploration. We're probably going to see other applications with Ozempic. It seems to be like a monstrous societal net positive. Any parting thoughts on when we see this puritanical sort of attitude against Ozempic? And these are the same fuckers in our industry, forgive my bluntness, who will then turn around and demonize people for being overweight in the first place. What the hell's that all about? What do you say to those
Yeah.
people?
I mean, those people, those people have something else going on. And honestly, for those of you who, are listening and, um, I wish I think I've said this before. I wish I could bottle something up, to kind of give people a thick skin and to not really care what others think. Because I think that's the most liberating thing, that I have sort of discovered, at least in my 40s. I'm here, I'm on a GLP-1. I decided a year or two ago that I was like, you know what? Like, everybody keeps talking about this drug. Everybody has all these feelings. I'm just going to come out and say, like, I've been on this med. I've been successful on this med. I do prescribe this med to, my patients when indicated. And, internet, have at it. Like, go ahead. And like, I wish I could, impart that sort of, I don't give a crap what other people think. I'm going to live my life and be happy. And whoever wants, this random stranger on the internet wants to say something or, kind of crap on my parade, that's on them. That's a reflection of them and not on me. So, for people who are just anti, like, medication, really need to think about what it is in their life that they're having so many feelings about. Because when you start talking to them about what is it, like what bothers you about it, it's really nothing. It's a lot of feelings, not a lot of thought, and a lot of feelings that people have.
Do you think it's the type of person who, because I usually find it's from the bro hard types, it's not all these guys, who have lived a life of, almost puritanical fitness and nutrition, clean eating, that sort of stuff. And they've achieved theoretically these physiques based on sacrifice, effort, etc. And I'm sure there's components of genetics, there's components of
Yeah.
hard work, and they attribute a lot of morality to it. And so therefore
Uh-huh.
they feel like, well, I did this a hard way. How dare you
Right.
try to achieve this by taking a shortcut and not suffer the way I did?
Yeah, I guess there I remember seeing on the internet too that something to that effect where like, being lean and having a certain type of physique is like almost like like a type of signaling, like I've made it. And now
Mm.
that it is now even more accessible to all these other people, it almost seems like now my physique or my goals or this thing that I worked so hard for is now being taken away. But you also have to understand that, hunger signals are all also a genetic thing. And so you still have to do the work. Like, it's not like you take Ozempic and then all of a sudden you're going to get this like glorious, physique that a lot of these, I find that the physiques of these people who are anti Ozempic have and have posted on their Instagram profiles. You're not going to get that physique, not in the slightest. So I don't understand like what their problem, their, issue is because you still have to do, it's still hard work. It's just instead of having, a hunger that's like at an 11, you've literally taken it down to, a zero sometimes. But even when you're dieting, you still experience hunger. It's just not as severe uh, as it was before. And you put somebody who's even on Ozempic, you put them on a huge calorie deficit for a prolonged period of time, they will experience hunger and they will start to rebound back. And that's what I've pretty much seen for with a lot of people who have been on like who have lost a large amount of weight over a long period of time. So I'm not quite sure where they're coming from. And I almost just every now and again, every 6 months or so, I'll kind of see where, what the fuss is all about. And then I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to get that out of my algorithm because I just don't want that in my life. I really don't.
Good lesson there. On Instagram, you are at Dr. at Dr. dot Crystal.
Yes.
What other resources do you want to direct people to? You guys just launched RPU.
Yes. That is, sort of a campus and community where you can currently, uh, check out Dr. Mike's courses on diet, training, and recovery. There is a community where people ask questions. We have live Q&As with Jared Feather, IFBB Pro, Nick Shaw, Dr. Mike, myself, and then we'll start having other guests on for a live Q&A session. People can ask questions, post their technique for training, all sorts of things. And then we also, Jared, Mike, and I also have the bodybuilding anatomy book that's coming out with human kinetics very shortly.
Ooh. Okay, I can't wait for that. That is really cool. I'll be waving that around. Awesome. Okay, everybody listening, I hope you love this. Christle is a great friend. I have long endorsed Renaissance periodization. I love what you guys do. And to give you an idea, like, I'm not just saying this stuff. The last 2 years of my event, I had you standing on my stage. I had a limited number of spots. You were amazing the first year. You had people crying, telling your story.
Oh,
So we brought you back year two. Everybody loved it. Full endorsement. Hopefully, you'll come hang out with us at Real Coaches Summit in April. Message me if you want more details on that. You'll be speaking again. And if you are enjoying this, if you felt this episode, because I'm trying to make these episodes a bit more topic based, certainly theme, so that way they're useful to you, but they're probably going to be useful to someone in your universe. Maybe you've got a friend who's thinking about Ozempic, is using Ozempic, you're concerned they're not resistance training. Maybe there's someone else in your world has been talking about it. They're afraid of the side effects or the bullshit that people are telling them. Please take this, put this in their DMs, hand it to them, tell them to listen to it. This is why I'm doing this. This is why I reshifted the focus of the podcast. I want to help more people. Coaches, I love you guys. You guys are amazing. This stuff's going to help you with your clients. But guess what? You guys are already drinking the Kool-Aid. This is, we're trying to, all those other people we're trying to help, right? The over 80% of North Americans who are, quote, metabolically unhealthy.
yeah.
Please, for the love of God, help me, Christle, my other
Yes.
guests, get in front of these people. You guys are awesome. If you have any questions, message me. I want to hear what you think about the episodes. Christle, thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me on.